In preparation for Battlebots Almost Season 3 airing on Discovery Channel, I wanted to do a video on the latest incarnation of Battlebots RC toys that they've put out on the market, or at least one of the versions of them. These are the smaller ones, the ones that have the most variety in their offering. Back around the time the second season aired on ABC, or the second season of this reboot, it's really confusing. They had released two different RC vehicles and this arena. So this arena you could buy with the two RC figures inside, or you could buy the pack with just the two robots in it, or you could buy the robots individually, however you wanted to buy it. But basically, I went for the full-on version. It comes with Tombstone over here, and then Witch Doctor up here at the front. The arena is basically just a cardboard base with the Battlebots logo. It has decals on it with the logos on it, the hazard markers on it, the kill saws. Around the edge, it even has the screws and everything going around. There's a low wall on the arena. It's all separate pieces that plug in, 4 different pieces to plug into the sides. And that's to represent like the Lexan walls of the arena itself, but there's no lid, and it's actually kind of short. And then you get 2 hammer weapons. These are just triggered by a little lever here, and if you're fighting your friend, you can smash a robot with this. There's not really much behind it. I actually have the older arena playset they did back in the early 2000s, and those hammers actually hit with a little more force because I think they had a better spring in them. But these do their job. You only get 2 of these, so I have one in the red and one in the blue side, and I just put them on one physical side of the arena. I guess you could put them opposite one another, but you could pick where you want them. So after those 2 robots came out, I kind of thought the line was dead because it didn't seem to sell particularly well, but a little while later, they came out with 2 new ones. They have Beta and Minotaur, which are 2 fan favorites from Season 2 of the reboot. And from what I've seen at Toy Fair this year, they announced more, including a Hypershock and I think a Bronco, which I'm really excited about getting. So those will be out eventually, I guess. These are all made by Hexbug, which is a company that makes a lot of similar things, some branded, some non-branded. A lot of educational sets. Even within the Battlebots realm, they have some stuff that's supposed to like teach kids how to put things together. They're kind of like pseudo Lego kits with electronics mixed in. They use the standard Hexbug controller. They did stick a Battlebots logo on here, but it's basically their standard controller. You have a forward and back button to move the robot forward and back. You have turn buttons, and then a little trigger switch here at the top that turns the weapon on and off. You also have 4 different settings for the channel the robot's on. So you can basically operate 4 of these independently at once. There's no power switch or anything on the remote. You just set it to the channel you want and go to town. The robots themselves all have a button located on the bottom. And I believe basically the system of this is you hit it once, and it's on for channel 1. You can hit it again. It'll be on channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, back to channel 1. And then you can kind of hold it and release it, and it will shut the robot off. It does a little twitch move to show you that it's changing its status. So first off, let's take a look at Witch Doctor. I have had the opportunity to see Witch Doctor in person, and this version does seem pretty true to the original incarnation of that robot. The paint job is pretty accurate. It has the little evil-looking face here on the weapon blade. We do have the bone fingery-looking bits there on the front wedge. Just the front wedge configuration they use without their mini-bot. It's hard to see, but it even has the wheels at a slight angle. Actually, the wheels aren't at an angle, but the chassis is bent to make it look like they are. So that's kind of a neat attempt to make it more accurate. And then with the weapon on, that cool little vertical spinner that I could use to hit the other robots. Now, all of these robots have damage points. So there's 3 pieces of armor on each that could be ripped off. And I guess the idea is if you're playing this as a game, if you knock the 3 pieces of armor off your opponent, they lose. So the top armor is 1 component. So that's held in by magnets. It pops right off. And then 2 sections of the wedge will pop off. And in that state, I guess you would call Witch Doctor dead. The figure obviously still works because nothing's been done to it to actually damage it, but that would be, I guess, the game. And if we flip the robot over, you can actually see it's clear on the inside. You can see all the motors and electronic components. I guess this is supposed to be the educational factor with this toy. so that kids could actually see how it all works. Speaking of which, it does work on infrared. That's the infrared sensor right there. A little transmitter light there at the top of the remote. And that does mean that you have to have line of sight to the toy for it to operate. If you're pointing the remote somewhere else, a lot of times it won't work because it can't make that connection. But it's simple enough to just keep your remote in line with the figure. Next up, here's Tombstone. And this is a much more simple design than Witch Doctor, at least I think so. It uses the black plastic as the frame of the robot, which works pretty well. They just have the red weapon bar on there, which Tombstone has a few different weapon bars you could use. They did a really good job of making the gearboxes pop out for the motors, like the real robot, which is neat. But the rest of the robot's mostly just gray with that black trim, so it's a pretty simple design. And then the weapon is really cool on this one. Just like in real life, I think it is the most terrifying of all of the weapons they've put on these toys. The blade is very much hollow. It doesn't have any weight to it. It's belt driven as well, unlike the other ones that are gear driven. So there's really no power behind this. You can stick your finger in the blade all day long and it won't do anything to you. One of the downsides with this is the way they hold the weapon on is with a little bolts going through here. There's a bushing inside the blade to let it spin freely, and then there's a bolt going through. But the vibrations of the weapon caused the nut that was on top of here to come off pretty easily. I know a lot of people had that problem. I believe actually originally the bolt was going through the other way, so the nut was on the bottom, so as it was driving, it was actually helping to wear that off. So I flipped the direction it was going, but then I lost the nut, so I ended up gluing the shaft in place. Because there's a bushing on the weapon blade, it doesn't matter. It spins just fine, so that wasn't anything to really worry about, but it's kind of a pain because when the bolt does come out, the weapon just dislodges and it's pathetic. So the armor plates on this robot are the top plate, just kind of hard to get your fingers into, but that'll pop right off. And then these back panels will also pop off. These are just held in by magnets like everything else, but they're kind of hard to get on there very well. They do tend to flop off on their own, and they have a slight angle to the edges of them. So you have to line that up properly for them to sit right. Sometimes you find yourself flipping them over to get them to actually fit back onto the robot, but they stay on okay. And once again, you can see all the electronics inside, just like with Witch Doctor. Next up, we have Beta, which is one of the most unique ones in this set, since it doesn't have a spinning weapon. All the other ones right now have been spinners. I guess if they add a Bronco to the set, Beta won't be alone in being a non-spinner, but right now it's the only one we've got. I will say mine, I don't know if this is true with all of them, but it sounds a little grindy when it drives. Like, the other ones are not nearly that loud and obnoxious sounding. But the cool factor here is the weapon. If you hit the button once, normally you would just hit the trigger once, it would turn the spinning weapon on for one of these robots, and then you hit it again to shut it off. But here, if you hit it once, it triggers that hammer, and you hit it again, and it will rearm itself. It obviously is much faster going down than it is going up. I believe if you hold the button down, it will actually reload on its own. You don't have to hit it a second time. So if you have the presence of mind while playing with it to just hold the button down, you can be back and ready to go. One of the other cool things with Beta that a lot of the other ones can't do, I think Tombstone can sometimes run upside down, but because that infrared sensor's on the bottom, it doesn't always connect, and Witch Doctor's drive motors are in the front and aren't in the right position to let it drive upside down. But Beta, because its sensor's kind of on an angled section of the back, you can actually have it flip, and it will right itself. Now, it won't right itself as I was trying to originally if the hammer's already cocked and then it tries to flip. It just doesn't have any power because I think it's all spring-loaded. But if the hammer is down and the robot gets flipped, it will flip itself back over, but as you just saw, it might lose some armor pieces in the process. Speaking of the armor pieces, they are all the side armor, so we have these two different side pieces that look kind of like mirrors of each other that pop off, and then this front section as well. These are held in with more than just magnets. There's actually little grooves in the front that also help hold the armor in place. So it seems to be a little harder to get the armor off of Beta. There has to be kind of more of an upward hit, which makes me wonder if Tombstone is going to have problems knocking the armor off this figure. But the cool thing with Beta too is that it's all clear. There's no sections of it without the armor on that you can't see into, except for the bottom, of course. But you get a lot of visibility into the chassis here. And last but not least is Minotaur. Minotaur has the one thing that I wish the other ones of these had, which is a status light. When you turn it on, you have that nice blue light in the front indicating that it's working. This is something that's actually on the real robot, so that's probably why they ported it over to the toy. But it would have been nice to have a status light in all of these. I think the design here is really well done. They captured the artwork from the robot pretty well. They captured the overall shape okay. It's a little boxier than the real Minotaur, but as to be expected, I think, with any of these. The one thing I really am happy about is they got the drum shape right. The drum is kind of a single tooth design where one section sticks out further in the front, this part here, and that's what you'd actually hit the robots with. And the back side is just kind of like a little chunkier to kind of offset the weight. And they did that pretty well. And they even have the little scoops here up at the front that he uses to get out of his opponents. And then you can turn that weapon on. And despite my praise of the way they designed the weapon, it does seem a little off balance. The robot does tend to vibrate a little bit as it spins with the weapon. But overall, not too shabby. A really cool looking robot. And for the armor on this one, the top plate will pop off. And these two side plates will pop off, leaving it to be very, very rectangular. And once again, you can see all the guts in there. Okay, so I'm now going to show a demo fight of all of these robots fighting at once. It is going to be a little hard because beta, you have to use the trigger mechanism rather than just turning the weapon on. So it doesn't quite work the way the others do it. I have to shut the weapons off on the rest to trigger his hammer. But whatever, we're going to go for it. Let's see how this goes. So yeah, it's even fun just with one person controlling it. It's more fun when you have people to fight against, but yeah, I like it. So I gotta say, these little guys are a lot of fun. They're pretty easy to control, pretty easy to play with, and for someone who's driven the big robots and, you know, things many times the size of these little guys, they're not a substitute for the big robots in any way, shape, or form, but they are fun. And just to have a comparison to one of the ones I've made, he's looking a little worse for wear right now, but this is Son of Gorgor. This is my 150 gram bot, the smallest bot in my arsenal of robots, but he fits just perfectly in this arena with these little guys. I think he's about 3 times heavier than any of these ones in here, and yeah, he's really beat up. You can see by how he's driving. But yeah, it just also so happens to be a toy, which doesn't really help my comparison. But the big ones are fun, the quote-unquote real ones are fun, but these little guys are a lot of fun as well.